Welcome to the Skinwalker Debrief. I'm your host, TJ Allard, and I'm also one of the executive producers of the new TV series on history called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. I'm joined each week by Jason McClellan and Maureen Elsberry, and together we'll dissect each episode of the series and bring you some behind-the-scenes look at stuff, some more information, and a little bit more insight, so you can feel, what it's like to be at the ranch, or not. I don't know if you want to be there, but anyway. Jason has been exploring all the strange for more than a decade. He's appeared on Nat Geo, Sci-Fi, History, and he's the author of Only Weirdos See UFOs, an introduction to the public's misperception of unidentified aerial phenomenon and extraterrestrial life. Maureen is a journalist, researcher, and podcaster specializing in the anomalous. She starred in the docuseries Uncovering Aliens on Animal Planet and served as the ambassador for Science Channel's Are We Alone initiative. So this week, these two are going to help me, like every week, go through the latest episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, this week's episode is called Night Visions. And I guess it's kind of, self-explanatory. It's night visions. We're going to see the stuff that they're going to see at night and a bunch of other things. So I don't know where we should pick this up, how you guys want to discuss this, but I'm thinking the best way would be to talk about, start at the beginning. They recapped in the beginning of the episode, episode starts and they recap what happened when last week, bad things happen when you dig, the first episode. And they left us with a cliffhanger.
The case.
A case, yes. What's in the case? How many times did you see that meme, what's in the box, with Brad Pitt over the week? So, come on, you guys. Tell me what did you think was in the case, and what was your reactions when you saw what actually, when you opened it up and what it really was?
Okay, so when I mentioned my thoughts on what might be in the case last week and your mic cut out, I had said that I thought it was probably some sort of anomalous metal. And it appears that is what it actually is. However, as we discussed previous to this recording, did not realize that what was in the box was displayed as the magnet that was then in the intro scene. So for me, it kind of went over my head. I think I don't understand it quite yet of why that was in a super secure location and where it was found and why it was pushed that way. So I would love feedback on that.
Nice. Jason, what did you think?
When the case was opened and we saw the magnet, of course as they were talking, I was thinking, perhaps there's a really strong magnet in the case. But then we saw the magnet and I thought, there must be something else under the magnet because come on, I want more. It's just a round magnet in this pelican case. Yes. Why is it in a pelican case and why does this change everything?
You have a very big problem with pelican cases. Last week you were like, I don't understand.
That's my problem with it, I guess.
In a pelican case.
What is it with pelican cases, man?
I love pelican cases. I think they should be used for certain things, not for. Yes. I don't know.
Right.
It's not like pelican case is shielding anything from the magnet either. So I don't know.
See, we should probably ask Eric. I wonder if he did have it lined with something. That'd be cool. Why was it in that pelican case? I mean, maybe he did. I can always throw that out there.
Pelican cases are cool for storing everything, though. So I mean, it looks really cool.
So what's really interesting about that magnet, that has always been one of the things that they've noticed, the electromagnetic energy that's on their ranch. I mean, and Eric goes into that a little bit about he thinks there could be something generating that underneath the ranch. Now, the funny story, I believe one of the phones on the table was mine, my old phone. Because while I was out there, that happened to my phone. My phone bricked, battery died. Well, screen turned pink at first. This was my old Galaxy S8. Screen turned pink, and no idea why. I kept doing it, and then my battery died at one point, and that was it. Couldn't get it back on. We charged it. We tried everything, and then he took it apart in about 4 months. It took him to jumpstart it, and he got it going again. But he, was telling me how it was how it was so fried, and he was asking me if I had put it in a microwave and asking me all this ridiculous stuff. But now I think he, when he pulled that magnet out, it was like, because he'd always theorized that there was something, there was some kind of magnetism affecting things on the ranch, which would explain a lot of the phenomenon, like film being erased in the past. That was a big thing. People would always lose footage. Well, if you had, it's kind of like the old devices that you would take into Blockbuster, you go over the tapes, the magnets, you plug it in, turn on the magnet and erase the tapes. Well, I guess that had happened to a lot of people over the years. So on the ranch. And and one of the things that a lot of I saw on Twitter a lot were people asking why no digging, right? We can go, talk about that for 3 hours. But Eric, from my conversations with him, is he's very committed to doing observational science. So he does not want to disturb anything. He wants to be quiet and watch. That's kind of the way he wanted to approach things. Watch and record. So that's why, and he lays it out pretty well for everyone. But it's hard for people to kind of understand. Like, observational science isn't a sexy science. It's not, necessarily doing cool stuff. It's literally sitting and watching for a long time. And hoping that you catch something. So that was kind of where his head was at the time. And I think Bryant kind of laid it out like, look, we can't dig. There's there are risk factors here, and let's just exhaust all these options first. But I think we can do above the ground before we would do anything. And so I'm glad to see that it kind of went that way, as opposed to people just all of a sudden pulling out shovels and digging.
I think that's a very wise point. Jason and I happen to be able to talk to our friend who is an interdisciplinary scientist, geologist, basically, recently. And he actually used to work for Bigelow Aerospace, so it's kind of a weird tie-in. However, we asked him about his thoughts on the geology of the ranch and what's going on there. And it was kind of interesting because, we projected the idea of, when we looked at episode 1, we had the ranch lit up on the ridge. And he was talking about different heat and mineral things that maybe could attribute to that. But then it got very much more interesting when we talked about dissecting possible minerals, uranium, and poisoning, and what would that look like for bovine life and for human life. And I think there was no answer. However, there was some potential clues that would elicit the idea that maybe we should dig in some sort of fashion, but not really dig, because this is not looking good for people. And so I'm not sure how to accomplish that. What I'm saying is that I feel like geology is a super big clue to everything that's going on, and that we need to figure out the right way to dissect it in that manner.
I think that's pretty reasonable assumptions. That seems like, I think that is what people are kind of understanding. It's not the woo-woo. There's something actually going on here that they're going to get to the bottom of it using the scientific method, and as opposed to just people jumping to conclusions. And I loved watching this progress and unfold, because then we go into, so that was our kind of recap of the last episode, and now we're into Night Visions, which is the current episode, and it starts right off with, okay, they are now actually done with the talking, and let's get into some action. And right away, Tom and Travis are just driving along, and next thing you know, they're getting a call that, hey, you got to come up here and see what's going on. And it's not because you have to see something floating in the sky or see something crazy happening. It's because something geological is going on. There's some kind of anomalous thing happening here that our our sensors are picking up. It's not people just, it's not like you are an organic, detector. It's not like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps. No, we have devices that are picking these things up. And so it, starts off right away, like, okay, let's get into the action. And I like the fact that those guys got in, and now you have specialists with tools. Like, what was your take on this? I mean, did you want to see more of this, less of this? Like, how did you feel when you saw them going into it?
Well, I loved it. I mean, when Travis suggested that, doing the testing over the entire ranch, the whole property, getting scientific readings, that was really exciting. That is very useful information, and it gives you, a good baseline and a good overview of what's happening all over the ranch. I mean, I don't even know how they accomplished that, if they even did really measure everywhere on the ranch. I mean, you're talking, 400 plus acres. That's a lot of area to cover. But I thought that was rad when they decided to pull these teams out and go out and get readings, because that's one of the biggest things. And again, we saw last week on the first episode, getting unusual spikes, getting microwave radiation, things like that. So to go out and test the entire ranch, I was really excited when I heard that right from the start.
I mean, this is what people have wanted to do forever, right? This is kind of it. And Brandon's like, he goes big all the time. So, Maureen, what were you going to say?
Oh, it's just, go big or go home, as you were saying for Brandon. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the most important thing we can do, is the more acreage we can do on the ranch and testing and see what sort of aspects come from that. But I also want to stress that it's not just the ranch, it's this area. So it's like the Ute Reservation and the surrounding area. So what is happening just in these areas? Let's test that. And so, yes, going out and trying to sort of read the meter all over the place is the best thing we could do. And it's going to be weird, and we don't really know what's going to happen, but we should at least try.
Right. I mean, they did a great, they gave a little bit of the backstory of, the Navajo and Utes, and the history of the Skinwalker, or the legend of the Skinwalker. And then Tom starts to talk a little bit about, his injuries again. And then, so this is something I'm not at all familiar with and have, no knowledge of really, but he talks about shadow figures. Now, do you guys, what are your thoughts on these? Like, what do you know about shadow figures?
Well, I mean, I'm.
I imagine it's a long. Okay.
Yeah,
I teed you up for a big topic, but no.
Yeah. So I'm not going to pretend like I have extreme knowledge on shadow figures, but I have written about them in the past, and there is a lot of tie-in with shadow figures, with alleged alien abductions, and sleep paralysis, and that's about as far as I can say of knowing about what shadow figures are. And I know that it's projected a lot in the ranch. And I think, again, this is something that we'd want to look into in regards to uranium poisoning and other things to rule out. I'm not saying that what people see on the ranch is false. I am saying let's rule that out, because a lot of the shadow figure and the voices and things like that could potentially, I say that very loosely, be related to some sort of geological thing. And if that is what the case is, then we're looking at a whole different scenario. If it's not, then we're looking at something super anomalous that is happening. So, shadow figures are typically something that pops up, again, like I mentioned, with the sleep paralysis issue. So, and they will appear in the bedroom.
Now, have there been reports of that on the ranch in the past? Like, is that kind of something that's been documented in the past that you guys are aware of?
I don't know. I don't know. I know I've experienced it personally, and I know other people that have, but
okay, so you can't just throw that out there and not expound on that. So you have experienced shadow figures.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, it's something I've researched pretty extensively, because I have dealt with sleep paralysis like intensely, and it's a lot of alien stuff and shadow figures and things like that. So for me, I've attributed that to sleep paralysis. Maybe it's not that, but I like to think that it is, because
Jason,
I've had to deal with that.
Jason, what about you? Do you have anything to add to the shadow figure?
So I can't point to anything specifically, but I do want to say I do believe that there are cases of this being reported on the ranch and in the area, but it's also sort of there's a little bit of the Skinwalker lore there as well. The Skinwalker is described in very many ways, and the shadow figure goes along with the shape-shifting, the changing, and sort of being in a sort of non-defined form and things like that. So it could be attributed to the Skinwalker phenomenon as well.
Okay.
TJ, I will tell you, there is this case, and Jason, I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if it was Clifford Mahooty or one of the other Navajo Rangers that shared this, but they told a story about driving on the Navajo reservation in their car, and they had a Skinwalker running fast, like some sort of beast running faster than the car in the desert in the middle of the night right next to them. And it's the scariest story I've ever heard in my life. And it's super insane. And these are credible, officials.
Yeah, I don't remember who told that story. I remember hearing it.
You remember hearing it?
It was probably the Navajo Rangers, but
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Okay. Now so Tom, he's telling us about the shadow figures, and then he goes back into his injury. Gives us a little bit more insight into his injuries, and then I don't think it stops him though from running headfirst into whatever dangerous thing is happening, because they run right up the hill, and there's a sinkhole, and it's like, hey, let's go stick our heads in there. Like, what's going on in that thing? So I mean, to Tom's credit, it's like this kind of stuff doesn't really scare him. And he's the one who's taken the brunt of all of this from, as opposed to anybody else who's out there right now. And I think that seeing Travis kind of react when they do come upon the sinkhole, when they do come upon the sinkhole, and Travis has physical reactions to it. I guess it's kind of like, okay, the viewers are there watching this and seeing this happen, and knowing that we have measurements or we have devices that are detecting something, and now he's responding as well. But he does refer to them as transient spikes. So it's not like saying like he's caught in a confined space. Now, are there a lot of, because Tom does mention there's a lot of other people that have experienced this stuff, and is it specific to that sinkhole, or does that happen in other places that you guys know of? Have you heard anything else like that?
Personally, I think that there's a lot of talk about magnetism and how it affects people's physical being. So I would say that happens a lot. However, I cannot specify a location or anything else. So Jason, maybe you can, if I don't know if you remember any specific location. No.
Certainly with the ranch, this is the first I've heard about that little cave, that little sinkhole. So I think the other stories of people experiencing that on the ranch have been in other locations. But,
yeah.
It was cool. I mean, it worked out really well on the show because, they happen to have a team there with equipment, to be able to measure things as this stuff was happening. So,
right.
That was fortuitous, and it was, really good for them to be able to measure things like oxygen and also to be able to rule out things they were looking for there, like hazardous things like asbestos and other things that could be naturally occurring in the area.
But TJ, I think you need to fill us in, because from what we saw in this episode, it looked like nobody actually really ventured into the cave. Did people venture in? Or was it just outside the peripheral?
Yeah, right. So we're getting there. Things are moving forward in the show. I can tell you that well before any of this happened, I actually had almost the exact same reaction to that hole. I just didn't stop when you get into the first entryway. I kind of stuck my head in and tried to take a look into the darker part of it, and I ended up. I had a lot of the same reactions that Travis did. I think he refers to his head being swimmy. I didn't say the word swimmy, but I definitely felt that. I also ended up being sick for the next 9 months after being in that cave. I kept calling it, but they're calling it a sinkhole. I was referred to it as a cave. And so in that sinkhole, I must have, now knowing what we know now with those guys measuring what was in the air, maybe I had inhaled something because I had some kind of respiratory illness for a very long time. Doctors were stumped. I went back to New York City. I mean, I probably had seen no less than 3 doctors. I had gone in an iron lung. They had done the methichlorine challenge tests on me, a number of different tests, and no one could figure out what it was. And it just would not subside. I was seriously sick for 9 months. And then just as quickly as it came on, it was gone. And I was fine after a certain period of time. But so, I mean, I did have I had a lot of the similar experiences that Travis had. And so I can speak to that, at least now they know that there were spikes in the VOCs, that volatile organic compounds that are there. But I didn't necessarily know that then. So
again, one of those things that's very interesting, looking at whether magnetism has something to do with why you all were getting so sick, and we don't know. And so super interesting, but the same thing with Thomas and you is we have doctors that are saying we cannot explain what is happening.
One of my doctors went as far as saying that she would refer to whatever I had as alien. Like, you don't want to say that. Come on, really?
Wow.
Perfect. It was. And something I didn't know at the time, and so I went back to New York, and when they tested me, when you go get blood tests and whatnot, they ask you in the U.S., like, had you been in certain areas? Because I guess there are different blood tests that they would run on you if you had been in the Southwest or the Northeast or whatever. And there were none of the labs in the area that were able to do the tests that would have been more revealing for things that I could have contracted or inhaled or whatever if I was in the southwestern part of the U.S. So it was just interesting to know that I thought blood tests were blood tests. I didn't realize it was just very specific, regionally speaking, they would be specific, but it was. And so, yeah, she was like, oh, this, we can't test for it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's alien. And little did she know where I was. I'm not saying that it's alien, but I'm, anyway. But
okay,
you were in a swimmy hole on Skinwalker Ranch. The swimmy hole.
On Skinwalker.
I know. I'm sorry. That was my favorite line from Travis. Is his? I feel very. What do you say?
Swimmy heady.
Swimmy heady.
So going back to the magnetism. So then, right after he pops out of there, all of a sudden, one of the first things he says is batteries of his phone are dead, and then one of the technicians, their phone just shut off, and back to this magnetism. What is causing these batteries to drain? And it's not just specific to the ranch. That happens on. I've heard of that so often when anyone deals with anything in the paranormal realm, and I'd say paranormal because everyone's now lumping things in like aliens and ghosts and God, whatever. It's all paranormal. So I'm just referring to it as paranormal. I may not be using it, correctly, but Yeah, what is it? Like, what do people think that is? Like, what are the theories behind the batteries being drained all the time?
Phew. I think there's a lot of different theories about what drains batteries and how it's like a life force sucking out the energy. However, I think that the magnetism aspect is probably more accurate, and what is happening there to drain batteries. Let's dive into that instead of the idea of that ghost or someone else is trying to drain your energy.
The life force. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I love this. I love that we're having these conversations because these are topics that people have kind of danced around the edge of for such a long time when it comes to anything ghost related or alien related, quote unquote, alien related, ghost related, anything paranormal. People tend to just dance around this. And now that these guys are bringing in legit equipment, I mean, when moving on in that episode, like going to the next, right away, like to the next block. And when I say block, it's when you're watching a television show, most shows are presented in blocks, like A block, B block, C block, D block. And so a block is pretty much the space between the commercials. So before the first break, that's the A block, and then the B block, and so on. So right, in that same block, then you got them getting ready to go camping, and they break out. Travis just starts rattling off all the types of equipment that they have, and so now you're talking about approaching these woo-woo-ish kind of theories with legit science. And so hopefully, if we continue down this path, you're going to start seeing more and more answers, and at least narrowing it down to things that it isn't. I mean, does that seem like where you would want to go with this?
Yeah, and my initial thought when I saw them setting up was that is a badass camping trip. That's how I want to go camping.
Yes, exactly.
For
Bust
sure.
out all the toys.
I was also laughing because they all had their matching camping gear. So it was one of those things where it was like government-sponsored camping trip. Not government-sponsored, but, they all were like with their little purple chairs and everything. And I was like, oh, they all got their cute little camping gear.
Corporate
in terms of like actually going camping, awesome. I love it. Do it. That's the best way to analyze anything.
It is. I mean, did you see that satellite dish? Like they were just setting stuff up and.
Yeah, I've never been camping with anybody who brought their own satellite dish. I mean,
right?
Me either.
Or television, and and then that goes to the next, like, well, besides that, you get to see Eric set up a little bit more in the command center, and they kind of touch on the fact that that place is just covered. I mean, there is just constant monitoring of everything, like every nook and cranny of that place. And so that kind of leads to, this is why you don't go to Skinwalker Ranch, because there's always going to be somebody watching you. As soon as you break that perimeter, you're on camera. It's
big brother. Big
brother is watching. It's the eye in the sky. So we get to see a little bit of Eric's setup, and then this is where it becomes. This is the kind of stuff I feel like people have been waiting to see, breaking out the big guns, like breaking out the big toys. And it's like, okay, we're doing laser experiments. You're doing beam tracking. These guys are setting up 60-inch televisions in the middle of a field to use as a monitor so they can see at nighttime. So now, what were your thoughts on that? Like, what did you take away from all of the scenes with the infrared stuff and the light, the experiment with lasers?
Like I was mentioning earlier, we talked with our geologist friend Ben McGee, and he had mentioned something about like if the sun is hitting the ridge at a certain way, it would heat up the minerals in the ridge to then you possibly project like that sort of night vision light up instance that we're seeing. And I'm super curious about that. I'm not saying that's the right answer. I'm just saying it was a very interesting point, and I wonder if that explains that specific light up incident or not.
There was something I wasn't aware of, these white discs on the mountain. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Like, what do you have any idea what that is? What those were?
I have no idea. It's going to be something with the
They're
geologic
freaky, right?
makeup of the mountain, of the ridge, but yeah,
Right.
they didn't really go into that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and it's like that's something. I love Ben, by the way. Ben is awesome. I mean, I've talked to him a few times. Like, I still want to do something. Find a way to work with him at some point. But he's. I would love to know what his take on that is. Like, if he had any insight as to what kind of minerals would it have to be, or what kind would produce that kind of glowing.
We'll have to have Ben on this show at some point.
I 100% know he would jump on.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have like another big brain.
Again, I think so much is related to the geology of the ranch, I feel, as well as the microwave radiation, and those are two things that Ben is an expert in, both of those fields.
Yeah. So we kind of, Jason and I did our little podcast on the Sunday, and we talked to him about radiation and whether the radiation fallout could explain some of the things happening on the ranch. Because he is a radiation expert, he works for NEST, which is the Nuclear Emergency. Jason, what's the rest of the anagram?
Response team?
Yeah.
No, there's no R in there. NEST, not any NERT. It's not NERT. He doesn't work for
Anyways, he's a super smart dude.
Yes.
Way smarter than me. And he had some very interesting ideas in like how that would affect the bovine population and also people and whether, I mean, we tried to kind of dance on the subject of what would have caused Tom's cerebral sort of swelling.
Goose egg.
But yeah, but
did he have any insight? Did he have any theories?
No, he kind of like projected maybe that it was possible for some of the like when I say hallucinations, I mean this is like a projected theory. We don't know that people are hallucinating on the ranch. This is if that was the cause. That it was due to weird magnetism and other sort of polar things on the ranch, which is why we're seeing this like uranium or not uranium poisoning, dig or not dig.
I mean, Tom's the first one to question it. I mean, even the last, in this episode, he even says, I don't know if I was hearing the voices in my head, or was I actually hearing voices? I mean, he's Tom is really grounded, and he approaches this, very level-headed. He doesn't jump to any conclusions. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm just can tell you what I'm experiencing, and hopefully a doctor can figure, they'll be able to tell me or give me answers. And I mean, that's a big thing. It seems not that it seems, I mean, it is. It's a big thing. They want answers, I mean, this guy, something hit him, and then watching this episode, it looks like something hit him again. And I don't mean like punched him, hit him. I mean, something, something physically, I don't know. Yeah, I guess something hit him.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so careful to say, like, I'm not saying people are hallucinating. I'm saying that there is this potential that can we figure out what is this like poisoning happening to people, that people are hallucinating direwolves on the property, or is that not a thing?
Mm-hmm. No, I don't know. That's a good question, and maybe we'll get some answers. You have to keep tuning in.
Yeah, nice.
Tuning in to find out.
I was really excited with the camping scene when they busted everything out and started trying to conduct experiments. And something that struck me, something that probably was a little frustrating to some viewers, but it's something that we're aware of, and that is looking at some of this cool stuff like the infrared cameras and the other visual tools they were using. They don't always come out so well on TV, right? You need to be there and be actually looking at the tools in use, because on TV a lot of times what looks really cool in real life looking at those instruments in use. On TV, it just looks like a bunch of static, and I don't understand what they're looking at. So that happens on TV. That's the unfortunate thing. But at the same time, it's exciting. You sort of get the sense, and they did a good job of filling people in to let us know what was happening.
Absolutely.
But that's just something that comes with the territory of using both night vision, infrared. Those types of tools don't really translate well to TV.
So here's something. Now, this, I'm sure, freaked a lot of people out. Kind of just fast forwarded past the growl in the background. Did you guys hear the growl? Like, come on. I mean, and again, this is legit. This is what was picked up. Like, there's no PA there with a growl. A PA is a production assistant. There's no production assistant, with a growling machine or playing growling sounds. The cameras picked up a legit growl, and there are animals there, but I mean, that sound. I would be scared. I mean, I feel like those guys handled it pretty well. I don't know if I would have been able to handle it that well.
I think somebody was hungry.
Yeah,
maybe.
I need to rewatch it because I saw all the Twitter comments about that, and I had missed it. And I think that for sure, if I saw or heard a growl on a ranch like that, I'd be scared shitless for sure.
I definitely would. And then the thing that I really loved, and I'm glad other people got to see it, because this was one of the most fascinating things to me about that place, was the infrared light that you do not see with your naked eye. But the first time Eric showed that to me, it's like, he's like, "You see that?" And I was like, yeah, you see it on the screen. And he's like, yeah, that's not really there. I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, "You can't see that with your naked eye." And it's kind of like, oh, come on, man, seriously? And now other people get to see, you're witnessing that firsthand. Like, there's something pointing out of the ground. It's not pointing at the ground. It's going away, like upward. And at one point, it's tracking something. It looks as if it's pointing and tracking something in the sky, as per their comments on the show. I mean, what do you guys think? Like, have you ever heard of anything like that before?
TJ, I think that's a really, really good aspect to talk about, because I have literally no I can't rationalize a beam shooting up in the middle of nowhere.
From the ground.
Yeah, from the ground. So, I mean, as in episode 1, they kind of made the comment about, is there a car dealership or something over there? And there's not. I don't have any answer. Jason, take it. I don't know.
No, I mean, that's a good way to say it. There's so many unknowns, and it's certainly not being an expert in IR technology and how that works. What else could possibly explain what it's picking up? It could be some other sort of signal, that it can see, like something like a cellular signal or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good theory.
But also another possibility that we've seen a lot in other types of videos, and probably not here because the ranch is more remote, and certainly everybody on the ranch would have been accounted for. But, if there is a car or something driving in the distance, and you happen to get a little bit of the headlights reflecting off something, or hitting the lens, and refracting a different way and just casting a beam, you wouldn't necessarily see the car if it's coming around the ridge or something, and that would cause some weird movement of a light pillar. Sometimes we see that with videos, but in the case of where this was occurring, that's probably unlikely to be the case.
I know from my experience being there, like, I know exactly where they were, and there's nothing there. There's no car headlights that are going to hit that. I mean, that direction, it just doesn't make sense. I couldn't picture it.
I think that that makes sense more with the what's the Texas Marshall lights,
right,
etc. Yeah. Like, there is some definite case for headlights to be certain aspects with that. In this case, yeah, it seems weird that the lights are projecting in that way, but I don't know how to answer that, honestly. Like, I think I'm still a little confused. However, I'm not saying that there's not a rational explanation for it.
So what got me about that, and I wanted to ask the two of you in particular, because you've had a lot of experience, being the Scully and Scully here that you want to believe. I mean, more historical cases and whatnot than I would. And have you, has there been anything reported like that besides the lights you just mentioned? But I have not heard of anything like that where people are just randomly seeing infrared lights shooting up from the ground. Like, that just seems odd to me.
And certainly it's more odd because not a lot of people have infrared cameras.
Right.
It's not something that, is a normal thing that a lot of people are used to using and seeing what things look like on infrared.
Right. I mean, not anymore anyway, because I remember back in my day, back in the 90s, when you'd buy a little camcorder, those things all had that infrared setting. And now it's, it's a high-end item to have infrared on your camera. But back then it's like, when you're making videos as a kid, you're like, go into the Incredible Hulk mode, and you would flip the thing and everyone turns green, and you're like, wow, that was your superhero moment.
Yep.
So after we out in that field, and then they run that last microwave experiment, and then it happens again. Then Tom again reaches back, and it's almost as if his injury to his head has been recreated. And it's funny because they weren't digging this time. No one was digging anything. But poor Tom, I mean, no, it wasn't like somebody ran up and hit him. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people around him. There's camera crews. It's like you're pretty insulated, so you're not alone. And nobody saw anything happen to you, but you can't deny the mark on your head. So it's beyond me. I mean, I think it's beyond a lot of everyone there. But I mean, what are the theories here?
I think that's the same thing that we've been saying, where it's potential to be some sort of magnetic thing. And it does not shock me to have that be something that would affect somebody's mental and or physical health, because shit happens all the time.
Right.
So at this point in time, I could see, like, if he was diving down and the magnetism is so high that he's having problems functioning, that's seen at normal levels in projects all over the world. So this is not super shocking.
I mean, that it seems now they have multiple anomalies happening. You have the magnets, you have the Tom with the magnets, and you have the microwave because they're doing the microwave testing. And then you have some kind of glowing rocks. I mean, so you have a number of things at play here. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. I mean, I think people are going to be very happy with they're going to enjoy the journey. I can tell you that.
We missed talking about the green laser.
Oh, the laser.
Okay, so yes, the laser. So thoughts on the laser?
So I have thoughts, but that's the one thing that I really wish I would have been there for, because I'm sure being there in person, I would be more perplexed had I been there. But
right.
Just from my limited perspective, being a viewer watching a TV show, to me, seeing what that laser was doing looked precisely like just reflection on the lens, just lens glare.
Right.
Yeah,
because
me too.
the second dot or whatever was moving exactly in response to where the laser was moving. It was kind of dancing around just like lens flare would do. But
right.
They were there. If they saw something different, I don't know. But that was my initial
when I saw
thought.
that too. No, I'm with you because I mean, and I think that they must have. Those guys obviously know what they're they know what they're looking at, and I'm sure it must have appeared different to them because it was immediately that's recognizable the same way to me. So I don't think just like you don't see the IR footage as well when you're looking at a screen with a camera. Maybe the camera wasn't doing that justice as well. Right. That's just kind of what I was thinking, but that does not. I mean, the power still goes out on it, which is just again come on, man. And again, that's another one of those, the batteries getting drained. I mean, that's just kind of a common thing. Like again, like when I was out there, well, one of the times, I had a drone. We had a drone that just went haywire. Drone battery, like the drone just dies, and then it kind of boots up slow, kind of gets back up, so you think we could take off, but then the camera the gimbal just starts going nuts, and it doesn't make any sense. It just completely gets disoriented, and it becomes useless. It becomes just a paperweight with propellers on it, a very expensive one. But we've had a lot of those things. I mean, like we used to have sound issues all the time. We were first trying to get things set up. This is before these guys are out there now, but I mean, when we were first approaching this, it was there were a lot of these types of things happening. So it's kind of good to know, in a sense, that it's consistent, that it's not just them or just you. It really is a consistent thing that happens. So that's kind of, you don't have to work too hard to recreate those things. They're just going to happen. So
I think for the general public, something that would be relevant to mention is that when Colum Kelleher and George Knapp were doing their NIDS research, that they had cameras and things that also would go down. And granted, these were way less high tech, and they would have something set up with duct tape, holding the camera up in a certain corner of the ranch, and
right.
They would go the next day, and it would be totally destroyed, and the camera was like, I don't know, blacked out or something. So this is not, like whether the technology is super high tech or whether it was back in the day, like there is something going on, and whether it's magnetism or something else, shutting off technology. And I think that's one of the most important places that we need to research.
And it is, and I mean, you guys got to see firsthand, from this last episode, Eric isn't screwing around. I mean, there's cameras upon cameras upon cameras. It's like you were saying last week, Jason, like, having redundancy or having a camera on the camera. It's like, yes, that is happening. Like, I mean, you could see it when he was standing in the booth. You're looking at like a wall of monitors, because
I love it.
He's not screwing around, and they're in all different light spectrums, and he's like, he just wants to get to the bottom of this stuff. So, I mean, it's great. I think they're living up to the expectations and the tech front. Like, people always wanted all these toys to be out there, and you know what? They're there. Brandon is like, yep, go big or go home, man. He's going big because that's what he does. And like I said before, like, he's not going to fail. Like, there will be results coming out of this. I'm confident, whether it's now, whether it's 5 years from now, things are moving. So, and I'm only saying it that vague because I can't tell you if it's now or if it's 5 years from now. So,
well,
what were you gonna say, Maureen?
I think we're all 100% on the, like, this is good and let's move forward. It's going to be slow because it's TV, but everyone take patience and let's see what happens, because clearly Brandon is investing in actually trying to get some results for us, and for the rest of us, that's awesome.
Yes. Now, Jason, I know that you have two ways for people to kind of write in or send in questions, and I know we're going to read a couple right now, but because a lot of stuff we talked about, I'd love to get people's feedback on what they were like, what they think, or what their ideas were, or what other theories there are out there, like for the infrared stuff coming from under the ground. Like, maybe it's stuff that we just don't, we're not aware of. Like, maybe Ben would be like, oh yeah, that's blah 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 blah. Like, yeah, okay. So if people have ideas or theories or information that we don't have, scientific stuff that we could use, that'd be great, please. But you have so it's the first one is the email address is the contact@rogueplanet.tv. And then the other is on Twitter at SkinwalkerPod. So,
correct.
Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you guys and girls. And, anything, any feedback, comments, questions. We love it. And so, Jason, you pulled a couple from this week, right? A couple that we got from online. I think you had a couple of questions that we, I don't know where they came from. Was it Twitter or was it YouTube? Do you remember?
I think one was Twitter, one was YouTube. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go. Well, so, I mean, the only ones that I'd seen was, so these two here, that was, the first one says what? So, hello, I'm interested if the team has had any sightings of Bigfoot during their time there. Not that I'm aware of. And do either of you guys know, has there been anything historically where people have said they have seen Bigfoot on the ranch? I don't know where any.
Historically, I think I can say that yes, there has been sightings reported, but I cannot be very specific on that.
Okay. And then the other was, are there going to be any static cameras put around the property so the public can stream the footage? Well, it's funny you say that because, what was it, right before the first episode, they had done their first live stream. So it seemed like it was a pretty successful test, and whatever those results of that were, then I think if it turned out to be positive for them, I would imagine that you would see more of that. It's just something I don't have info on, but yeah, it seemed cool. Like, did you see? Yeah. Oh no, you didn't see the triangle.
No, I didn't see it live.
Headlight.
No.
Okay. No, but the yeah, I would assume that that's going to happen. I would be surprised if it doesn't. And yeah, but I mean, who knows?
And it just helps Eric, right? I mean, it's more eyes.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that had always been one of his, his sticking points. Like, the more people, the more eyeballs that we can get on this, the better. Like, the more
crowdsource it, man.
Crowdsource, yes. He used to call them, was it biological sensors he would call things? He was like, cows, they're biological sensors. Humans, they're biological sensors. Like, they're pretty much just, they pick up information and they relay it, but they don't necessarily give you zeros and ones. They might scream, or they might laugh, or they might do something else. So, I mean, the more the merrier, and I think that it would definitely help. Kind of like SETI. Remember SETI at home?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is SETI.
Yeah. SETI at home.
SETI has asked programmers to join in and help sort of put their bandwidth forward to search for extraterrestrial life, and it's the same damn thing.
Yeah.
Sadly, they just closed that down. But.
They did, right?
Well,
I thought I read that.
Jason, stop breaking our hearts.
No, well, you know what? That's a good thing, because now all of those computers that were being used for that can be used for the ranch.
All right.
Mm-hmm. You can, kind of, how do you get all of those people to say, oh, wow? Because there was a lot of them, man. I know they used to keep a record, right? Like,
they had a huge number of people participating in that. I mean, I can't tell you how many random people over the years, through our UFO career that would come up, and they weren't, really UFO people, but they were casually interested. They were more nerds than specific UFO nerds, and they just thought it was cool. They're all, I like geeky computer stuff, and hey, aliens, that's cool. Sure, why not? They just have it running in the background of their computer.
All right. Well, I think what the lesson that is learned from this is we need to have a nice little sheet explaining how people can get involved and how they could do it, and then use them to our advantage. Hey,
I mean, it's not something out of the ordinary. I mean, and so, we'll make before we go into that, hold on. So next week, the previews, we saw some of the previews. We saw the drone. So it looks like we're going to have our first drone interactions here. I think people have been wanting to see that for a super long time. And what were they setting up? Like another transmitter, I believe? They were setting up some transmitters or something? They were setting up some kind of power. I think it was some kind of power source, which I think people are going to be interested in seeing that stuff. It's kind of cool. And now I guess the big tease, the big news is next week we're going to have the one and only Dragon joining us for our third episode. So, if you have questions, please send them in. I know Dragon is going to be interested in talking to people. He's looking forward to it, and I think this would be a good start to kind of slowly get the cast in here, and see how many guys we can get on here and talk to and let you guys grill and
be nice.
No, of course.
In a respectful way, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. So
let's drill Dragon in a respectful way.
What should I prep him for? What should we tell him? What do people want to know most?
You should have all the answers.
Yeah, Dragon, have all the answers.
What are aliens?
Who are the aliens and what did they do?
Exactly. Perfect.
No, so yeah, next week Dragon will be joining us, and but until then, this has been great, you guys. Again, I really appreciate you doing this with me, and bringing this to people. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you. This is
our pleasure, man. We love doing this, and for people who, this show can be consumed in multiple ways. It's both a video and an audio show. So depending on how you're listening to the show, you might not have known that there's another way to consume the show. But it is an audio podcast, which you can get and subscribe to on both Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts now. And it's available as a video show on YouTube.
Excellent.
But we look prettier on video, so watch us on video if you can.
Check out the YouTube channel.
Some
of us look prettier on the audio podcast.
That would be me. No, I wanted to put out there too that, and it's funny. I've already had people reaching out to me on Twitter that they have interesting stories, interesting locations. Like I've already gotten a handful of people just kind of randomly. Hi, I'm doing this, like, wait, what? I've been looking for you for 6 years. Like, all of a sudden you're showing up now. So please, keep all of this stuff coming. Like, we want to communicate. We want to hear from people. I think that this is a great opportunity because this has been such a secretive place for so long that it's now we're kind of opening the door. We've got people from the cast coming on. I'm here to answer questions as well. Like, let's share this information. Let's kind of open the door together and let everyone kind of see, and as long as Brandon wants to keep doing it, then, great. Let's go for the ride, man. I'm in, So anyway, that's it.
And also I cannot stress enough that I don't have answers to your telepathic dreams that you're having, because I'm getting a lot of emails about that right now.
Well, you're not talking to me or Jason, right?
No, I'm talking to the general public. I can't solve it.
Jason, what kind of questions do you
get?
Maybe
Dragon can. We can ask Dragon. Maybe he has the answers.
Maybe.
I bet that dude does. He knows all.
Yes. Well, we'll see. I'm going to be curious to see where he's going to be calling in from. So that might be another surprise that I think people will really enjoy to see where he's calling from.
I'm really looking forward to it.
It'll be good stuff.
He's calling in from Homestead too, and he's going to give us a little surprise.
Oh, that'd be crazy. Yeah, that's one scary place, man. I'm all set.
The growl in the background, and it's actually just Eric's stomach.
With a sandwich again.
Yeah. Where's my sandwich?
Well, this is great, guys. Thank you very much. And so next week, same thing. This time we'll have Dragon, and please enjoy the show Tuesday night at 10 o'clock on the History. 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern on History. Secret of the Skinwalker Ranch. Thanks again. And we'll see you soon.